The Ugly Duckling. In a clump of leaves by the edge of a pond, a mother duck sat impatiently on her eggs. She longed to glide on the water under the summer sun, but she had to wait until all her ducklings had hatched. At last the eggs began to crack, and little heads poked out into the world. The other ducks gathered around to admire the new arrivals, but there was one egg, much larger than the rest, that still hadn't cracked. "That's a turkey egg if I ever saw one," quacked an old duck. "Just leave it. You'll never teach that one to swim." "I've waited this long. I can wait a little longer," said the mother duck. Shortly after, there was a tap and a crack, and the last duckling tumbled out of its shell. But was it a duckling? It was bigger than the others and very ugly. "We'll see," thought the mother duck. She guided her ducklings down to the pond, and one by one they jumped in. They disappeared under the water. Then they all bobbed up again, floating with perfection. "So you're not a turkey," the mother duck smiled. "You're just a big, ugly duckling." She took her ducklings to the farmyard, where the ugly duckling was immediately picked on. The geese hissed at him, the hens pecked at him, the turkey puffed himself up like a ship under sail, and chased him with a fierce gobble, gobble, gobble. Even the ugly duckling's brothers and sisters teased him, and his mother was too embarrassed to comfort him. The poor ugly duckling was so miserable he ran away, flying over a fence and landing in a bush. Little birds darted up in fright. "They're scared of my ugly face," he thought sadly. He stumbled on to the great marsh where the wild ducks lived, and hid there all night long. In the morning, the wild ducks flew up to look at him. "You're very ugly," they quacked, but they let him stay and drink the marsh water. Suddenly, bang, bang, shots rang out. Hunters were firing at birds from all sides of the marsh. The wild ducks took off in a panic as hunting dogs splashed through the water. The ugly duckling hid his head under his wing. Splash, splash, a massive dog appeared above him, his tongue hanging out and his eyes glaring. He opened his mouth wide, flashing his sharp teeth. Then splash, splash, he was off again. "At least I'm too ugly to eat," trembled the ugly duckling. He kept low in the reeds for the rest of the day until the gunshots finally stopped and the hunters left. Then he fled across fields and meadows, buffed by a stormy wind. As night fell, he reached a run-down old house. One hinge had come loose on the door, which was slightly open, so the ugly duckling squeezed inside to take shelter from the storm. In the light of morning, the ugly duckling met a bossy hen and a curious cat, who lived in the house with a little old lady. "Can I stay here?" asked the ugly duckling. "Can you lay eggs?" clucked the hen. "Can you arch your back or purr?" mewed the cat. "I don't think so," said the ugly duckling. "Then keep out of our way," they replied. So the ugly duckling stayed in a dark corner. He thought of the fresh air and the sunlight, and had a sudden desire to glide over sparkling water. "I don't belong here," he sighed to himself, and he went away to a large lake. Every day he swam and dove, but no animals would talk to him because of his ugliness. The weather grew colder, and the forest leaves turned yellow and orange. One evening, a flock of majestic white swans soared across the sunset, headed for warmer countries. The ugly duckling watched them in wonder. He had never seen anything so beautiful. Winter was long and cold. Snow fell, and the lake iced over. The ugly duckling barely survived, huddled beneath the reeds. Eventually, spring came, and he stretched out his wings. They were longer than before, and stronger. Their powerful strokes lifted him out of the reeds and carried him to a large pond in a beautiful garden. 3 magnificent swans were already swimming in the pond. The ugly duckling hung his head in shame. These birds were sure to peck at him for his ugliness. But then he saw his reflection. Looking back at him from the water, wasn't an ugly duckling at all. He had turned into a beautiful swan. The other swans swam around him, stroking him with their beaks in welcome. As he stretched his neck in delight, several children ran up. "Look, there's a new swan," they cried, "and he's the most handsome of them all." The end.